guys, just finishing up some prone overhead presses. Yeah, I've been doing a lot more of those lately because number one, they seem to be more shoulder friendly, and number two, they get after my core, and anything that helps me work my trunk, I'm always interested in doing. You know, a lot of people do overhead presses, and I think they like to do them because, you know what, they are one of the best ways to develop your shoulder girdle. But the problem is, with dead weight, you have to follow that line of progression straight up. And what ultimately happens is, if you got any postural dysfunction, or if you got some scapular weakness, you immediately go ahead and potentially put your rotator cuff at risk. Subsequently, a lot of people can't do overhead presses with dead weight. Now, what we find is, with bands, now they can start doing some overhead presses because they can work in the scapular plane. But even then, sometimes people will develop some issues that can't allow them to overhead press. That's why I developed the prone overhead press, because I thought, you know what, prone overhead press, still going to get a lot of good shoulder engagement, shoulder development, but I'm not going to go ahead and put that shoulder in as much risk. Can't quite explain why, but I think that the reason is because we're getting so much stabilization effect through the opposite hand and through the trunk that the shoulder and the scapula is much more locked down and stabilizing in this position. I also think we eliminate the vertical vectors, and so therefore now with less vertical vector force coming down on that shoulder, it's a little bit easier for the shoulder to go ahead and tolerate this movement. So here's the progression for a prone overhead press. You're going to go ahead, first of all, you want to make sure that you attach the band a little bit higher. Keep it up there so that as you're pressing, you can push up and out and up a little bit, and the band won't rub across your arm, as you're going to see in just a second. From there, go ahead and step yourself out. I start in a hands and knees position, kind of called a three-point position, and we go ahead and work overhead presses in a three-point position. Now, not only is that going to start out stabilizing my left shoulder, but it's going to activate my trunk and get that going. Very stable position to be in to start with. So use that three-point position to get people acclimated to it. From there, we're going to go to what I call kind of an extended three-point position. So now what we're going to do is keep it in here, but we're going to bring the knees off. Now, by bringing the knees off, I'm immediately going to get a lot more trunk activation as I go through that movement. That might be more than challenging enough for most of your clients right there. But if you want to go one more step, let's take you into a full pillar position. So now we're going to go ahead, lock out, and we're going to go full pillar. Now the key here is, can't let those hips rotate, can't let that core start to twist. You got to lock in tight, stabilize, squeeze the thighs, and now you're pressing overhead. Notice that the band doesn't touch my shoulder because I'm pressing straight up overhead. I can also press in a little bit of a scapular plane if I need to. So the beauty with the bands, especially in prone, is that you don't have to go in that straight sagittal plane. You can veer off a little bit, go into a little bit more frontal plane if you need to avoid overhead compression or some rotator cuff impingement issues. So there you have it, the prone progression for prone overhead presses. I think you're going to enjoy these. If nothing else, they're a great change of pace exercise to overhead presses. And if you're like me, I like doing overhead presses, but you know what? I can only do them so much. The prone overhead press allows me to do more overhead pressing, but in a very safe position. So give it a shot, let me know what you think. Start with three-point, go to three-point extended, and then if you're really good, get yourself in that tight pillar position and start overhead pressing.